webinar over to Sue Tempero.
Thanks, Catherine, and welcome to all of you and to the first of our several webinars related to good governance. Yes, I'm the chair of the Governance Committee, and the Governance Committee for the NSCDA was started several years ago, and its purpose is to promote, create, and best practices for the National Society and the corporate societies through communication, education, and leadership development. The chair and vice chair of the committee are appointed by the national president for a 2-year term, and members of the committee include the immediate past president, other past presidents, present and past executive committee members, national nominating and codification chairs, present and past presidents, and dames who have a special expertise in governance, making sure we represent all regions. They are listed by name and contact information in your national directory, which is on the website of the publications. To support our commitment to leadership development, we're devoting this webinar to bylaws. As you know, our previous governing document was the Acts in Council. And last year, a committee was formed headed by Leonora Blanca, who was a registered parliamentarian and codification chair, with members of the past president, national presidents, our parliamentarian, myself, and others, to revise the Acts into bylaws. After many months, this was completed. It was presented to the executive committee for their review and approval. Then 3 webinars were held for about 40 members who were in leadership positions to again review and make suggestions. And finally, at the October meeting of the National Board, the revised bylaws were presented and approved. And then they were presented to the Biennial Council and approved in October. In the meantime, a subcommittee of the Governance Committee created model bylaws based on the NSCDA bylaws to be available to and used by corporate societies if they wanted to. Also at the National Board meeting, each member of the National Board was presented a complimentary copy of the Robert's Rules of Order 11th edition, which is the document referred to in the NSCDA bylaws. So every state should have a copy of this as it was given to their presidents. Which brings us to today. Now we have updated bylaws. So what does it mean? How does it affect our corporate societies and our individual members? Thus, we created this webinar, which is basically in 3 parts. First section, Leonora Blanca, who's a codification chair and registered parliamentarian member of the Governance Committee, will give an outline and hopefully address the questions as to whether a corporate society's bylaws need to be updated. Then this will be followed by Governance Committee Vice Chair Karen Buckley, who also serves as the NSCDA parliamentarian. She will outline the process if you conclude the bylaws may need to be updated or revised. And this will be followed by Nancy Reid, who is a new member of the Governance Committee and also serves as Governance Committee Chair for the Virginia Society. Nancy will discuss what if the corporate society bylaws are not in compliance with the NSCDA bylaws. And she'll also address why should you have a governance committee. Since you're all muted and may have questions, we encourage you to write out those questions during this webinar presentation so you don't forget, and we'll respond to them within 2 weeks. So I'm very now pleased to turn and introduce to Leonora Blanca.
Hi, this is Leonora. Thank you, Sue, for that nice introduction. And everybody wonders, how do we know if our bylaws are out of date? So I prepared for you some questions to ask as you review your bylaws and hopefully set the standard and let you know that these are all based on Robert's Rules, newly revised, the current edition that Sue just mentioned. And the specific references will be included in a copy of this presentation my presentation that will be on the website next week. So if you want to know more detail. So the first question is, do your bylaws have these 9 required articles at a minimum? These are the 9 required articles that Robert's Rules said that any organization should have. Name, object, membership, officers, meetings, board of managers, committees, parliamentary authority, and amendment. You can have additional articles, and complex organizations usually do, but at a minimum, this is what you should have. Next, I want to go over these categories, these 9 categories, and talk about what should be in them. So starting with an object. These 2 articles are basically repeat what's in your corporate charter. When your articles of incorporation were written according to your state laws, the specifics were included in there. Usually includes name and object, sometimes additional information. So it should be exactly the same in your bylaws. If you want to change some of those things, you'll have to go have legal assistance to do that. The next article is membership. Does your article in membership include a vote on each candidate by ballot by the Board of Managers? This is a requirement that is in the NSCDA Constitution, and it doesn't tell you how to vote, how to conduct the vote, but it does require you to have a vote by the Board of Managers. The second thing is, are the fees and dues specified in dollar amounts? Sometimes societies like to put those in other documents, but that is not in accordance with Robert's Rules. And since fees and dues are as much a condition of membership as other membership requirements, such as your lineage, then they should be included in that particular article. Also, do your membership article state that members are free to transfer between corporate societies, as it's stated in the transfer resolution? That should be information that members need to have. And often not stated, but really should be in bylaws, are your rules for reinstatement and membership limitations. And for example, if a member is dropped for non-payment of dues and comes back later and wishes to be reinstated, that should be specified how that is handled, rather than leaving it to the whim of the current administration. It wouldn't be consistent. Membership limitations are specified in the Constitution, and they're a requirement for you to decide what they are specifically to your society. Moving on to the next article on officers. Does your article on officers list the officers to be elected by the society? One thing is exactly, if you do not list an office, you cannot elect someone to that office. And if you do list an office, you do need to elect someone to that office. Most organizations' bylaws don't limit all the offices, so one person could hold 2 offices. I'll give you an example. Maybe today your society does not need a corresponding secretary as well as a recording secretary. But you might have both of those offices listed, and one person be elected to both offices. That would be perfectly acceptable. There are other offices that you would want to limit, so that only one person, only the person holding that office couldn't be, say, both president and treasurer. That wouldn't be good fiscal decisions. So those kind of limitations need to be listed. Provide for an elected nominating committee. This is one of the recommendations that Robert's Rules is very clear on throughout its document, that the nominating committee should not be appointed by the president, and should be elected by the members. However, it could be elected by managers. You determine that in your bylaws. Provide eligibility requirements for nominees for the office of president vice president, treasurer, and other offices. And to give you an example, in some organizations, a term of years is required before a person is elected to the office of president, for example, to be assured that the person elected is experienced enough. And treasurer, it's often required that that person have some financial background. So whatever your eligibility requirements are, they should be written into your bylaws. Now the next one, define the term of office for the president and other officers. And I put quotations because it's a very important phrase. For 1 year or whatever number of years you determine, or until their successors are elected. The key phrase here is, or until their successors are elected. If you simply have the beginning, which just says 1 year, and if you fail to hold your annual meeting and for whatever reason, let's say bad weather, then you are without officers legally because you did not elect them. But if you have the or until their successors are elected, then your officers will continue in office. The other thing that this or until gives you the power to remove a non-performing officer from their office without bringing any charges. The way Robert's Rules interprets is that you can vote somebody out, let's say they're ill or incapacitated for one reason or whatever, moved away, and then you can elect a new person to take that place, or if they resign, then you can appoint an officer. But you do need that phrase, or until their successors are elected. Then you need to state when newly elected officers take office, because if you don't state it, then according to Robert's Rules, which are our parliamentary authority, a person takes office immediately upon election, which means that a meeting would be turned over to the new president as soon as she's elected. So if you wish to have that happen at the end of the annual meeting at which they were elected, you should put that into your bylaws. Another important thing to have in your officer article is for a runoff in case of a tie in an elected office. I've seen this happen in other organizations where usually it's 3 people running for a position, and you think, well, that's never going to happen to us. And then when it does happen, you don't have it in your bylaws. So it's a good idea to provide it. And it would sound something like this. If no one achieves a majority vote after the first ballot or after the second, depending on what you would prefer, then the person with the lowest vote would be dropped and the runoff would be done between the two. Next, you want to state the authority of your president to appoint all committees except the nominating committee. Now, I know in a lot of organizations, committees are kind of casually organized, but the president, since she has responsibility for the entire running of the organizations, needs the authority not only to appoint the committees, but to remove or replace people who may or may not be performing as needed. So with the power to appoint also comes the power to remove or replace. Again, not the nominating committee. That's elected by the members or by the board of managers. State next that the president serves ex officio on all committees except the nominating committee. Now, what the responsibility for the president to serve ex officio means is that she can attend all meetings, but that she's not counted in the number required to achieve a quorum in the meeting, nor is her presence required, but she can come if she so desires, and again, except the nominating committee. Now, the last one I have here is provide a general statement of officers' responsibilities. Often in an organization, new officers will pick up the bylaws and they'll read their specific duties. And when they finish, they think they have a full understanding of what their responsibilities are. But in most organizations, Those responsibilities are simply those of that office, but they have broader responsibilities, such as those that are prescribed in the SCDA Constitution and bylaws by the Parliamentary Authority, that would be Robert's Rules, and if the Board of Managers or the members at the annual meeting vote for, let's say, the treasurer to produce a particular report, that becomes another duty. So a general statement will then allow a new officer to understand that it's broader than the particulars that are listed. Moving on to meetings. Does your article in meetings state the date requirements for your regular meetings and annual meetings? Do not be, I caution you, do not be unhappy, not unhappy, that's not the right word, cautious with these, because the next one says that the Board of Managers, and item B, the Board of Managers have the authority to change the date or meeting location. But it's best to state, let's say the annual meeting is in the spring or it's in April, so that the regular annual meeting will take place usually within, several weeks each year. And also regular meetings. The regular meetings, according to Robert's Rules, certain things happen at regular meetings and you will have them in your bylaws. For example, your bylaws might state the date that the nominating committee is elected. So it might be the regular meeting in the winter or the regular meeting in January. So that's why you want, you don't have to have exact dates, but you want to state when they are. Then you need to have a reasonable numeric quorum, not a percentage. Too often people want to get very precise percentage, but the problem is that membership is an ever-changing number, and if you have to calculate the percentage and you have a difference of opinion on how many members you have on that particular day, you don't need that. Not only that, a numeric quorum like 10 is easy to count. You look out, you can see there's 10 people there. Now, the word reasonable is very important. Often at the beginning of an organization, they set their quorum too high. Now, if you don't have a quorum in your bylaws, then you fall back to Robert's Rules, and Robert's Rules says that it would be a majority of your entire membership. Almost no organization ever gets that kind of a quorum, so you really should have it in there. But a reasonable number on a normal meeting, whatever that is, use that for your quorum. Now the last one on this page, authorize electronic meetings and electronic voting. This is key to operating in today's world because most of us have been using electronic communication in our jobs in these organizations, but Robert's Rules in the 11th edition, that is the current one, states that unless your bylaws specifically authorize electronic meetings, you can't hold them. They aren't legitimate meetings. So you want to be certain that you think through how you want to do that. Robert's Rules gives some very good advice, and I have that reference for you on setting up and handling electronic meetings. Now, keep in mind that you can still use email to send out material if you wish, and you can use email or other methods to summarize it. But when it comes to taking those electronic votes, that needs to be defined in your bylaws. Okay. Moving on to the Board of Managers. Now, here's one that's really important to understand. If your bylaws do not authorize a board, you can't have one. There is no such thing as an automatic board. So the bylaws must state that there is a Board of Managers, and it must state that composition. Usually it states the elected officers. In the case of the colonial dames, it states the elected officers and the elected managers. That comes right from the Constitution. And then your article should identify what powers the board has. Usually the powers are to conduct the affairs of the society in between regular meetings or annual meetings, depending on how you've written it. You should specify the kinds of meetings and the special meetings and the quorum for the Board of Managers. Now let me go through each of those so that it's crystal clear. There may be regular meetings of the Board of Managers, let's say perhaps 3 a year, fall, winter, and spring. And then you must authorize special meetings, because if you do not authorize them, you can't hold them. But also special meetings are called when something comes up unexpected and needs immediate attention. And in that case, the special meeting would have only one subject to be discussed and voted on, and that would be at the special meeting, and it would be listed in the call to the meeting. The quorum for the board would be, if you use Robert's rules, a majority of the board, and that's probably a reasonable thing to have for the Board of Managers, but it's best to state it nevertheless in your bylaws. Another issue that comes up for organizations is provisions for the president to invite committee chairs to attend with voice but no vote. Now, I put this in here because one of the things that happens in organizations, if people do not understand that the Board of Managers is not an open meeting, all members are not invited to attend, only the members of the board. And the board is often charged with handling sensitive information about employees, finances, membership conflicts, other things. So there is no requirement that the board open up their meetings to anyone outside of the board itself. But occasionally the president may need to invite chairs to come who have information to provide, but they still are not permitted to vote. So it needs to explain that in there. Wording is in the sample bylaws, the model bylaws that you can use. Now, the Board of Managers is usually a larger board, and sometimes you need a smaller board within the board, the executive committee, to handle things that in between the meetings of the Board of Managers. But if you don't define the executive committee, it's like the Board of Managers. You can't have one. So you want to define your executive committee, and usually it's just the elected officers, which means the elected managers are not part of that. You can have a separate article for the executive committee. You need to define the powers and the meetings of this executive committee. And remember, the executive committee in and of itself, the powers are usually motions that are passed, but they're ratified at the next meeting of the board. A little bit like we heard today about how we voted on the national bylaws at the national board, and that was ratified at the biennial, which means they have a second level of approval. And the last one on here is electronic meetings and electronic voting. Same issue as earlier in meetings. If you want your Board of Managers or your executive board or both, you need to authorize electronic meetings. Okay, moving on to committees. Now, committees, the standing committees are usually and appropriately listed in the bylaws. And those are the standing committees that are appointed by the president. These are committees that have an ongoing responsibility, and they report to the overall membership. However, you also want to, and you need to list all your standing committees. So for example, if you don't have a finance committee, you can't appoint somebody to it. You'd have to go to item B, which is to establish a new committee and approved by the board. So you need to give provision in there that other committees, standing or special, can be established by the president and approved by the board. Now, a standing committee, again, ongoing responsibility. A special committee has usually a single task, and when that committee is disbanded. One example, nominating committee. And in some organizations, the nominating committee is listed under a standing committee and is expected to have continued that input over the year, where others, it's a special committee, and once it has given its report, it goes out of business and ceases to exist. Now, committees is another area where you want to authorize electronic meetings, because often people are far away from one another and it's just a lot easier for them to handle a committee business. Now you notice I didn't put electronic voting there. Most committees do not have the authority of voting. They vote to recommend. So it's not the same type of authority. They will recommend to the Board of Managers to adopt a certain motion to spend monies or start a project. You need to authorize them to have electronic meetings. And in this article, I would also authorize town and county committees, although they can be in a separate article. One question that came up recently is, do county committees have their own bylaws? And the answer is no. They are a committee of a corporate society. They can have standing rules, but they should not have their own bylaws. All right, moving on to Parliamentary Authority. One person asked me once, how come Roberts gets so much opinion about what we do? And Robert has that opinion because we have given it to him. Do your bylaws state the Parliamentary Authority as approved in the NSCDA bylaws? And quote, this is an appropriate way to include it. When your members vote on the bylaws, the new ones or the revised ones or the amended ones, they are voting that we will abide by Robert's Rules of Order. Now, I want to just let you know, Robert's Rules does not supersede your bylaws. It's the other way around. Your bylaws have higher authority, but you can't possibly have in your bylaws all possible conditions that would happen in a society. Most of them will never happen, but if they do, you fall through, like I explained about the quorum. If you have your quorum in your bylaws, that is the highest authority. But if you don't have it, you fall through and you use Robert's requirements. So this is why we give Robert all that authority. Last item I have is amendments. Just like our United States Constitution provides for, we need to provide for amendment of bylaws. Usually, Robert's rules suggest a 2/3 vote with previous notice. Now, the importance of this is that most members care about amendments. They know that this is their governing document, and if previous notice is given and they feel very important for them to be there, they will come to the meeting where the vote is taken. So that's why you have the two parts. The 2/3 vote, Robert's Rule says that if you're going to change something previously adopted, it should be at least by 2/3 votes so that you have a majority of the members, 2/3 of the members who want to make the change. So lastly, I just want to run through, do your bylaws conform to the NSCDA Constitution and bylaws? And this is just, most of them. Vote on each candidate by ballot, specify corporate society dues in US dollars in the article on membership, refer to the NSCDA per capita dues in the NSCDA bylaws. You don't have to put the amount in, but you should refer members to that so they know that there's two parts to their responsibility for dues. Transmit twice yearly report on membership changes. Now, one society told me that they thought this was changing, that it was too cumbersome, but until the National Society changes the bylaws or the Constitution, we're required to do this. And if you have suggestions on changes that need to be made, certainly send those to the New Business Committee. Next, identify voting members of the Board of Managers as elected officers and elected managers. And that's to avoid the embarrassing situation where someone shows up at your Board of Managers meeting and they are not authorized to be there. They, if they read their bylaws, they would understand that they're not supposed to. And you know, as an aside, your Board of Managers minutes do not have to be shared with the members either, and they're, if they have sensitive information in them. Next, permit transfer of members between corporate societies as that all corporate societies have signed and agreed to. Elect or appoint delegates and alternates to the national councils and regional conferences. This is an item that most people don't think about, but if you are going to be attending these, you need to have a process in your corporate society that says how you're going to have people become delegates. The reason this is important, not only for the people who are appointed or elected, but also if you use it for tax purposes and you're going to take off your travel expenses, you want to be able, maybe hopefully you'll never be called by the IRS, but if you are, you want to be able to show that our bylaws have a process where we elect or appoint delegates, and whoever those people were, they were legitimately appointed or elected. And also you want to mention that provide a reimbursement authority for the National Society and the Corporate Society payment to delegates. That information, I believe, should be in there. Finally, I'd like to mention that, just again to reiterate, you have 9 basic articles, but you also can put additional articles. And when you go through the National Society bylaws, you will notice that they were written in the same way that I explained for corporate societies. Those nine sections or articles are included, and there are additional articles because it's a complex society. Yours is probably complex too. These are some suggestions. If your society wants to have an order of business to the bylaws, I would put that in the special rules of order that you put at the end, because bylaws cannot be suspended. Special rules of order can be, or can be changed. So you want those, not, if you want to have a defined order, you can put them there. And the last thing is, I want to let you know that the NSCDA model for corporate society bylaws were written to answer yes to all 10 previously listed questions. That concludes my presentation, and now I'd like to introduce you to Karen Buckley, Vice Chairman of Governance and National Parliamentarian, who will lead us into the next section.
Thank you, Leonora. That was wonderful. Leonora has given us a good outline for what needs to be in our bylaws, but what if your bylaws aren't quite there yet? So I want to talk about how to get there. First of all, a point that Leonora will know, maybe the rest of us aren't as aware of this. If you're making limited changes to your bylaws, it's referred to as amending the bylaws. These can be pretty comprehensive, but it's not a full rewrite. A full rewrite or restatement is referred to as a revision of the bylaws. And what we did last fall at biennial was a revision by taking out of what was formerly the Acts and Council and adopting a new complete restatement that are now termed bylaws. So that's just a little point to know. In order to amend bylaws, and I'm going to talk about that, the process is basically the same. So I'm going to discuss amending bylaws. The first thing you need to do is to see where you start from, because what is in your current bylaws will set out your roadmap for how to get to the new ones. You need to see who needs to be involved in the amendment, who gets notice, and what vote is needed. Now, bylaws exist to provide a fair and organized way to conduct business. The notice of amendments is very important. It keeps the process fair and prevents people trying to play games. As Leonora referred to earlier, usually the vote needed to approve a change in the bylaws is a 2/3 vote, and I would assume that would generally be of your membership. So you're going to need to get notice of the amendment to your membership and conduct that vote, or maybe 2/3 of the people attending a meeting. If your current bylaws do not have any kind of requirements for amending them, then, like we talked about earlier, you go back to what are the requirements in Roberts. Roberts is a safety net. to pick up if we don't have it covered. So then the first thing, if you've decided that you need bylaw amendments, is to take board action to authorize and generally define what kind of amendments you need. If they are very substantial or they have not been done for a long time, you might want to consult with an attorney to see if there are any new state law requirements. The model bylaws follow a good format. It probably will comply with almost every state, but each state can have its own little quirks. States tend to adopt uniform laws of nonprofit corporation law, and they'll probably be the same unless you have something special in your state society. After the board has decided what wants to be amended, what needs to be amended, unless it's a very, very simple amendment with maybe, say, change the amount of your dues, you're probably going to need to refer it to a committee to draft the language of the amendment. And we know, working on the amendments for the revision, to be correct, last year we had a lot of discussion among the committee about the wording, and it's important to get that right. Your society may have a standing bylaws committee, and in which case that's who should get that referral. Otherwise, the president will need to appoint a special or ad hoc committee to draft the proposed language. The committee does its work, and then it reports back to the board with its language, and then the board considers that proposal and approves it, amends it, or sends it back to the committee, so that then you have an action ready to refer on to the real vote on the bylaws. And then that will go, next slide. Or wait, did I? So you present it to the membership. Now on to the next slide. There we go. So the board then sets time and the process for the membership vote. In our society, for instance, we have an annual, semi-annual meeting of the membership. So when we need to vote on amendments to the bylaws, that to be the time for that vote, unless we want to have some kind of special meeting of the membership. But again, you refer back to the current bylaws to see what your requirements for conducting this vote properly. At that meeting, or whatever that process is, the members vote on the proposed amendment. Hopefully it's required that if there is a 2/3 approval required, and the members either adopt or reject the proposed amendment or revision. Now in an amendment, that's probably fairly simple. If you're doing a revision, you may want to review the sections with your voting membership by section, but you can vote on the entire revision as a unit. So that is really what you need to do. It's not terribly complicated, but the process gets you to where you need to be. And now I'd like to introduce Nancy Reid, a member of our governance committee and of the Virginia Society, and let her talk to you about the requirements and the relationships between your bylaws and the NSCDA bylaws. Nancy?
Thank you very much. We've had a lot of great information today. You've been hearing from national leaders and professional staff. I represent the people in the corporate societies who are trying to determine how best to run them. To that point, I want to encourage you to consider having a governance committee, even if your society is small. Some of the reasons for this are being certain that bylaws stay current and reflect what is actually happening in your society. You can have a beautifully crafted document, but it is worthless if it isn't being followed. Keeping up-to-date job descriptions for officers and standing committee chairmen, and policies and procedures for committees, and making sure they are in compliance with the bylaws and practical. The third reason is making the job of the president less burdensome. Having a governance committee will definitely help you in recruiting excellent presidents. Number 4 is creating an annual board training day. You may not do this now, but it's a great idea to think about. Assuring that all relevant governance documents are available online. I think that's really important. The more we get online, the better leg we have to stand on. Now, for those of you who have created strategic plans and their implementation plans, bylaws, job descriptions, and policies and procedures are your friends. They are the mechanism by which the strategic plan either succeeds or does not. Every new strategic plan requires a thorough revision of the bylaws. Moving on to the question, what is the relationship between the NSCDA bylaws and corporate society bylaws? What do you do if they're not aligned? First, the NSCDA is a federation of corporate societies with a national headquarters. It has new bylaws, as has been mentioned, 2016, and they are available, and you have a link on your screen to find them. Each corporate society needs to have current bylaws of its own, and they should not be in conflict with or opposition to the national ones. The bylaws model offered by Leonora will help a corporate society create or revise its own bylaws. Having said that, the bylaws of the national and corporate societies need to be in alignment. How should you proceed? Corporate society bylaws should be scanned by the Bylaws Committee for possible conflicts. Some changes may need to be made. Sometimes, though, a different way of doing things does not rise to the level of a conflict. This is where wisdom and judgment come into play. Members of the National Governance Committee would be glad to help examine apparent conflicts, answer questions, and make suggestions. You have our contact information, so do use it. A final note, Virginia has a model for standing rules for town committees that I would be glad to share if anyone is interested. It helps assure that all the right bases are covered. Our town committee chairmen meet an hour before board meetings for training and sharing information. This and the annual board training are the optimum ways to get everyone on the same page where it is important. Thank you so much for listening to all this information. And now I return you to National Governance Chairman Sue Tempero.
Thanks. Thanks to all of you for your participation, and to Nancy, Karen, and Leonora for their important contribution, and to Catherine from Dumbarton staff for all your support today. Yes, it's been a team effort, and as I previously told you, we will respond to your questions because you probably have several after all this information. But we intend to respond within 2 weeks. And as said, we will share all the questions and answers with all of you. Also, you can listen to this webinar on the website, and on the Governance Committee site, we will post the PowerPoint and the expanded list of questions that Leonora referred to. Plus, if you have any other ideas for future webinars, we are committed to leadership development. Please let me know. We welcome your feedback on today. Please let us know if you found this worthwhile. We hope so, and hopefully you'll have a great day. Did you have any other comments, Catherine, that you wanted to, or the rest of you want to make any comments?
While I still have everyone here on the webinar, I would love to just show quickly, I'm pulling up the website now, exactly where the webinar calendar is, as well as the Governance Committee page. I think that those two things are of particular importance to most of the people who are on this webinar today. So right now you're seeing the main page of the website, nscda.org. To access the webinar page, you're going to go to the member login. You should all have the username and password. It's history and future, in case you have misplaced your login. And then once you're on the members side, you'll find the webinar information by going to meetings and events, and then you'll choose the webinars and travel section. that will bring up another page where you'll choose the webinar calendar. This is a really wonderful resource because it shows all of the webinars that are currently on the schedule for the next several months. And resources will continue to be added to this page. Webinars will continue to be added. And as Sue mentioned, if you have suggestions for future webinars, by all means, please let us know. We want these resources to reflect what it is you all want to learn. This particular webinar will be placed where you currently see the governance login for the webinar listed. The recording itself will go here. And as I mentioned, or as Sue mentioned, it will also go on the governance committee page, which you can access under committees and governance. There's currently a list of resources here on the governance page. The webinar will go here, as well as Leonora's points from earlier and the question and answers that you'll all receive, the answers to all the questions that you'll receive soon will also go on this page of the website. It's also where you can see the model bylaws as well as the NSCDA bylaws. So if any of the presenters have anything else, that's all from me. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew where these resources were located on the website.
This is Nancy. I would like to thank the staff at Dumbarton Health. Several of you helped us so much, and we very much appreciate it.
Wonderful. We're always happy to help, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And check back on the website. Next week, we'll have Leonora's points as well as the webinar recording up here on the governance page.
Thank you again for your participation and to all of you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.